All right, welcome back to the JavaScript training. In this section, we are going to discuss upgrading Checkout.js version 3 to the new version 4. So first off, we're going to go over a couple of the gaps you'll see between the two products. So functionality-wise, in V3, you had the ability to use dynamic buttons, which means that a merchant could set an on-click event to anything that they wanted, including an image that they had, downloaded that they wanted to use for PayPal. That is no longer available in V4. Following 302 redirects, kind of the classic approach to doing a PayPal integration was creating a server-side route that, like on the cart page, you would click the button and that would do like just an href link to the route that does the set express checkout to get the token, and then once you got the token, it would do a 302 redirect to PayPal. So that is not supported in V4. And then the last part is the condition method in V3, which told the JavaScript to only launch the pop-up or the experience once this function returned true. That's not available in V4 either. So a couple workarounds. There's really none for dynamic buttons. You really have to call the render button multiple times. We saw a couple examples in this training on how we can accomplish this. So following 302 redirects, the merchant must use a web service in order to get the token. So they'd make an AJAX call to get a token. Alternatively, they could place the token in the HTML on the server load and then use JavaScript in order to get the token out of like a hidden input field. But most likely they're going to want to use a web service. As far as the condition property, really the only workaround that we have is to validate whatever they need to validate outside of Checkout.js. Some ways we can accomplish that would be validate the form and then present the payment methods or the PayPal button after the form is completely valid. You can validate each input in order to see if the form's valid. There's a couple other ways we'll discuss as well. So we can't support dynamic buttons because allowing click events to be placed anywhere caused many issues with pop-up blockers in the V3 integration. It was our #1 issue, and many merchants actually went live with a faulty integration that actually blocked the PayPal experience with a pop-up blocker. It also negatively affected our brand by allowing merchants to use any sort of PayPal image that they wanted. This is going to make it so all of our buttons are consistent across all the different merchants' websites. And then finally, by rendering buttons, we can now add other cool features. So, like in the future, we might be able to render the payment methods in the PayPal account right on the merchant's web page if the person is already logged in or has used or is enabled OneTouch. Reasoning for the 302 redirects. By following the redirects, it was poorly implemented in version 3, and it caused many issues, such as if the set express checkout call failed and the merchant did a redirect to an error page, that error page was actually rendered in the pop-up instead of closing down the pop-up and doing a full page redirect. So there was some logic that did, counted how many times the URL would change, and if it changed more than 3 times, it was considered an error, and they would close down the actual pop-up. Well, that presented issues if the merchant was integrating through Cardinal, where they had to go to Cardinal first, and then that was then redirected to PayPal. So we could never guarantee how many hops a merchant was going to make. So it was really, there wasn't a good way to do that. And then as far as the condition property, we can't stop the experience from launching due to pop-up blockers. So there's no way we could really implement any sort of condition property. Once you actually click the button, that post-robot messaging is actually asynchronous, so we can't stop that in any sort of way without triggering a pop-up blocker. All right, so upgrading Checkout.js to version 4. So the Checkout.js v4 script is backwards compatible with the v3 integration method. However, all the new integrations should be done using the v4 integration method that we did in all the exercises previously. So the v4 integration method is using the PayPal.button.render, which is the button component that we saw in all our exercises. And then the v3 integration will have the function call below. The window.PayPal checkout ready will more than likely be there, and the PayPal.checkout.setup will definitely be there. So if you see anything like this, that is a v3 integration and should only be used if the merchant is already integrated with v3 and cannot upgrade at this time. So merchants actually integrated v3 in a lot of different ways. So it's impossible to cover all the use cases in this training. We're going to focus on a couple common v3 integrations and upgrade them to v4. But since v3 was very flexible, it allowed merchants to really do a lot of very, very different things that were actually unsupported, but actually worked. So we can't cover all the things that you will find out there when upgrading a merchant, but we can cover two of the very common cases. So a quick table on functionality conversion. So the v3 functionality, which would be like your button, so the button an array, which was an array of buttons that you wanted to attach on clicks to in order to launch the experience. This isn't any sort of functionality in v4 because we don't have dynamic buttons. You have to call the PayPal.button.render in order to render a button. The click property in v3, that's where you could basically hijack the onClick that in context or v3 would set, and then do whatever you wanted, and then you would call start flow in the future once you got a token to render the flow. This was usually when a merchant had like a web service and they wanted to make an AJAX call to get the token. They would use this click property. So the click property would be exactly equivalent to our current payment callback event, and you would only want to use the onClick in version 4 if they are tracking click events. So remember, the payment callback goes to get a token and resolves that token, which is exactly what merchants would use the click property for in version 3. So the condition property, once again, there's no v4 functionality for this. The merchant really has to do this on their own to validate their own form before presenting PayPal. And then also the multiple buttons. The current v4 does not handle multiple buttons. We saw in that exercise previously that a merchant would want to use some sort of an array of button configurations and loop through them in order to most efficiently implement multiple buttons. All right, and that's it for the lecture on upgrading Checkout.js. We're now going to do some exercises in the next videos.